Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with the go-to real estate lawyer in the country. How do I know that? And why do I say that? Because he's a regular guest expert on BNN, Global News, Citytv, CTV, and the list goes on and on. He's written columns for the Toronto Star and the Real Estate Magazine, and he's a best-selling author in the real estate industry for real estate agents, buyers, sellers, landlords, and investors. You can't tell by his face, but he's been doing this for over 3 decades, almost 4. And he's a senior partner at one of the biggest law firms in the country, RealEstateLawyers.ca. It's none other than Mr. Mark Weisleder. Mark, how are you doing today?
Fine, thank you. Thank you, SEHR. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being here. Mark, I know how much business you do with all types of real estate clients, buyers, sellers. And I myself sell over 400 condos a year to my investors and buyers. And I think one of the really, really nice things, and what most people don't know, is that in Ontario, you get what's called a 10-day cooling period. And I tell my buyers this is a great advantage to us because this is the time when you can actually do your due diligence, make sure that this is the investment that you want, arrange your financing. But most importantly, sit down with a real estate lawyer, because what people don't realize is the agreement of purchase and sale is actually 50 pages long with the condo docs, which are another 150 pages, and it's pretty overwhelming. So that's the time when they would go to an expert such as yourself. And that's basically the premise of what I wanted to discuss today, is what you look for in a review when you do an APS agreement. But before we get into that, I just wanted to touch on what are some of the differences between the legal documents in a resale deal versus a pre-construction contract?
Well, you mentioned one of the differences is that there is no changing your mind once you sign a resale deal. So sometimes you make the deal conditional on getting financing, but lots of times, especially when you get into bidding wars in the GTA, they don't want any conditions. So once you sign a deal, it's firm and it's usually closing within 1 to 2 months. The difference is you can see the unit, you can see the building, you can see everything. And so that's one thing. With a pre-construction condominium, remember, you're buying something that maybe will be built in 3 to 4 years. So you don't know anything. And that's why the government gives you protection. And one of the main protections when you buy a pre-construction condominium from a builder is you do have 10 days, not business days, 10 regular days to just change your mind. Now, you must remember, if you bought a pre-construction house from a builder, some people buy houses from builders, you do not have 10 days to change your mind. It's only when you're buying a pre-construction condominium, and then you have 10 days to change your mind. So look, that's the main difference between the rules relating to a pre-construction condo and a resale.
Yeah. And how are buyers protected in pre-construction?
Well, there's not too much protection. And you correctly said that, the contract's 50 pages and it's written by the builder lawyers and it's written to protect builders. So the 10-day sort of cooling off period is one of the main protections. And I can tell people without even looking at the contract that it's not fair. It's not fair to the consumer. It's loaded fair to the builder. So this is why you have to do the proper research. So number one, I say, go to other developments that were built by this same company and just ask the people living there, did they finish on time? Did they deliver what they promised? And did they correct all the issues? You have a year to correct problems. That's the best reference you can get, because as the people, your investors know, they're doing this for many of them. The main reason is they know that in 3 or 4 years, their investment will probably be worth much more than what they're paying today. But a terrible thing is if in 2 years the project hasn't started and the builder says, well, we can't build, we're giving you your money back. So you're not going to lose your money, but all those profits are gone. So this is why checking the builder and their reputation is so important. And one of the things I notice with people in your group at REC is that they only work with builders. who have a track record, who finish what they started. And this is why investors generally do well. But there are certain things that I always look for in the contract. So this at the sales office, they're going to give out incentives. They want to give out incentives, whether it's a free this, free upgrades, free, appliances, all kinds of things, maybe even a free parking space or locker. They'll give you things to get you to sign. And that's great. But some of the things that I'm looking for primarily are, what are the additional charges? Okay, it's one thing to say I'm paying $500,000 or $600,000 for a condominium with a parking spot and a locker, but there's also additional charges. And my rule is that the additional charges should not be much more than 2 to 3% of what you're paying. And so this is why there's usually 2 pages of what we call adjustments. These are additional charges. And careful buyers with agents and lawyers will try to see, okay, is there a cap on these charges? In other words, what's the most this is going to cost me? So if I'm paying $600,000, the most these charges will cost me on closing is another $20,000. You want to know exactly a good approximation. And you can usually do that at the sales office by negotiating, or that's one of the things that I'll try to do during the 10 days is I'll send a letter saying, we'd like you to cut down or give us a cap on some of these charges. So that's number one to me, because you got to know what you're going to pay to close the deal.
So that's a lot of information, Mark. So I just wanted to touch on, for those who are brand new to pre-construction, what exactly are capped development charges and what is the purpose of this?
Well, the main purpose is, as you can imagine, when a builder starts a project, they don't know all the costs that it's going to cost to get the project approved. They're in the process of making applications to the city and the province, and they're working out agreements. And the contract says that if they don't finalize everything, they can just give everybody their money back. But the good builders already know they're on their way to doing this. So one of the things they do not know right away is, okay, how much are we going to have to pay in all kinds of development charges from the city or from the school district or from the parks district? Like, there's all kinds of additional charges that the builder's going to have to pay. So they usually just say, whatever we have to pay, we're going to divide amongst all the units, but they don't tell you how much. So those are the charges that you need to get some clarity, saying that, okay, I just want to know that the most I'm going to pay for all those other charges are $20,000 for my unit. And that way you're not surprised at closing, because if no cap is given, they can just say, well, it's $30,000 because that's what we had to pay. So that's what I mean by capping charges that are not able to be determined at the time you sign the contract.
Right. Yeah, because when you look at the growth of our city, so to speak, and as we go further and further out of the city as well, like I'm selling a lot of projects in Barrie, and they don't have that infrastructure, for example, to have the roads, the hydro lines, the telephone lines, and so forth. So there are a lot of costs that the government has to spend to bring in infrastructure to those areas, and obviously those are the charges, which would be the development charges getting passed on to the consumers.
That's correct. And all we're trying to say is, when you sign the contract and your 10 days are up, you have a good idea what it's going to cost you at closing to do your deal.
Right. And have you seen changes to the development charges over the past few years?
What I'm finding is more and more builders are putting caps. The caps keep going higher because the city keeps wanting more. So, what used to be caps at 10,000 are now closer to 20,000, depending on the development. And so developers are estimating higher. They're estimating higher because they're anticipating, that it's going to cost them more. Everything's cost more, So that's what I've noticed. But at least many builders are willing to put a cap on their agreement.
Right, exactly. And what are some other incentives that you look for?
Well, the right to assign is very important. So many people buy and they don't know what's going to be in 3 or 4 years. Some may be planning to move in as a retirement a property. Some people may look to invest or just to lease it out to a tenant. But you don't know what's going to be in 3 or 4 years. Your life could drastically change. And either for reasons that you just want to make a profit before the closing, or you have to sell because you've lost your job, you can't afford a mortgage. You must have the ability to find another buyer. That's the right of assignment. Some projects, they'll just give it to you for a small amount, $5,000. Sometimes they charge a lot more. Sometimes the agent is able to negotiate something, in a package deal for investors. So it's not always the same. But as an example, most builders, even if they tell you, we'll let you sell to somebody else, they also say, we won't let you put it on MLS. So you're not going to put it on MLS because we don't want you competing with us if we have units still to sell. So now you've got to be dealing with a brokerage and an agent that have lots of buyers available, that they don't need MLS, that they will have a bunch of investors who will take over, at the right price. So that's another advantage that I've noticed with good brokerages and people that have done this for a long time. They have a list of investors who can help out. But you need that right to assign because, it's very important. Now, I will say this. If you're buying a brand new home from a builder, most of the time they give you no right to assign.
Correct.
Zero. Because, they're not going to do that. And so you've got to know you can close the deal in a case like that. But in most condominiums, if they're able to sell out, they'll give you some right of assignment.
So essentially, the original purchaser can take their agreement of purchase and sale that they signed, let's say today, the condo's built in 2025, and a certain period before closing, usually it's about 6 months to 1 year, they can take their contract and then potentially sell that to another purchaser who's now going to take on all the new obligations of that contract. Now, would they still get all the same incentives as well? And how would this affect agency?
So that depends on the language. Sometimes the contract says that any incentives will go to the person you sell to. Other contracts say, no, if we gave you, let's say, an incentive of certain things, an upgraded appliance package or all these other things, that's only for you. If you assign to somebody else, they don't get that. So this is why assignments are much more difficult because you have to read a lot more carefully. So, but in most cases, in my experience, most of the benefits will go to the new buyer in an assignment.
Right. And how does HST work in the case of assignments?
Well, HST, first of all, let me just explain how it works in general.
Yes.
Okay. So if you're buying most condominiums today, in my experience, brand new, you're paying a little bit over $500,000 to buy a condominium. Pretty much, it's hard to find a new condominium for under $500,000.
Yeah.
And that's an easy number to start looking at. So let's say you were putting an offer in today for $500,000. That's inclusive of HST. It includes HST. And the contract is written as though you're going to move into that unit on closing. Now, really, when you buy that condominium from a builder for $500,000, the real price is not $500,000. It's actually $524,000. That's the real price with HST. However, when a buyer moves into a new condominium, they're entitled to something called the HST rebate. And the HST rebate at this price is $24,000. So when you sign for $500,000, instead of paying the builder $524,000, what you're saying to the builder is, I'm moving in, and my entitlement to the $24,000 HST rebate, I'm going to give to the builder. So you will still pay $500,000 on closing, and the builder will collect $24,000 from the government. Now, many people buy a condominium as an investment. When you buy as an investment, you're not moving in. So now the builder cannot collect that $24,000 from you because there's no HST rebate for you. You're not moving in. So you will pay the builder $524,000 on closing. Now, many of your investors will then lease out the unit. And if you lease out the unit, you can then apply immediately for that $24,000 back from the government, and you'll get it. It just takes you 2 to 3 months. I know an expert that I send everybody to who's the fastest at getting the rebate, and you'll get your $24,000. The difference is you have to come up with it at closing, and then you get it back after closing. So simple math. It doesn't matter how much you spend for a condo. It's going to be $24,000, the rebate. So let's say you buy a condo for $700,000.
Right.
$724,000. So it's always the $24,000. If you bought a condo under $450,000, here's a little bit of a different math. Sometimes the rebate goes up to 26, down to 23, but for the most part, your investors today are buying 500 or more. The rebate will always be $24,000. So just as an example, when you're doing an assignment, the builder says, I don't care if you're moving in, you got to pay us the $24,000, and then you have to pay, you can collect the HST after closing, same way. Whether you move in or you rent it, you're going to get that $24,000. So that's how HST works on a regular purchase from a builder.
Perfect. So now let's say someone's bought that condo for $500,000, 4 years have passed, it's now worth $800,000. How does the process work then?
So there's a few different things. So they're selling it. Let's say they want to sell it for $800,000. So really what they're saying to the buyer is you take over my $500,000 contract. You pay me back the deposits that I gave the builder, right? Because but then you got to give me $300,000 in profit. Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky, because if you were buying this as an investment, then you have to charge HST on the profit that you made. So even though you may have made $300,000 in profit, if you take out the HST, it's closer to $260 plus HST. So you're going to have to pay HST on the profit. Now, that may not apply to everybody, depending on your investing circumstances, but that's what you need to know. And these are the discussions I have with people who are selling on assignment, because everybody's in a different situation. You can't make a rule for everybody. So there's HST that you have to figure to charge on the profit, or it'll be built in. You're going to have to pay it to the government. The other question people ask is this capital gain or income?
Right. And how is that determined?
So let's say you're making $300,000 this year. It's, okay, so if it was a capital gain, you would pay tax on $150,000 because half is tax-free. But sometimes the government says if you're a multiple investor, you do this all the time, that's your business. So this profit is not a capital gain, it's income. And then you would have to pay tax on the full $300,000. So you see, everybody is different. So I can't make a rule, but people call me and I usually will say, work with your accountant and we can figure it out. But you would see that anybody selling on assignment would need to know first, am I going to be paying tax as a capital gain or income? And will I have to pay HST on this as well before they figure out how much of a profit they should be selling for? Does that help?
Yeah, that definitely helps. And how long does it usually take to get the approval from the builder to go through with the assignment?
It depends when you do it. They usually say you can't do it within 30 or 60 days of occupancy or final closing because they're too busy with getting ready for occupancy. So, you want to try to do it. First of all, you have to watch your agreement. You can't do it sometimes before a certain date. But you want to try to do it a little bit earlier, but when the building is already, going up, because you want to have demonstrated that the builder's going to finish this before you get into the assignment. And then, in my experience, depending on the development, it can take 2 to 3 weeks to complete a consent with the builder.
Yeah, assignments have been, traditionally very lucrative because when you look at the real estate market and it's going up 5, 10, in this crazy market, 15 to 20% in some areas, people buy something for 500, it's close to 800, 850 by the time it's built. There's a lot of meat on the bone, so to speak.
Well, the difference here, and this is what investors should know. When you buy a detached house from a builder, it's probably going to take 18 months from the time you sign the contract till the house is ready. The real estate market can change in 18 months. And I've seen a lot of people not able to sell their home or close their home in 18 months. But when you buy a condo, in my experience, and nobody can give a guarantee, when you have this 4-year window from the day you sign until the day you have occupancy, the market may go down. We've seen that. We saw markets go down 15%, but then it came back. So in my experience, over the long term, most people are able to do well. People are allowed to occupy a condominium when the city says it's safe to occupy. So as soon as the city says it's safe to occupy your unit, the contract you sign with the builder says you will occupy. But just because the city says you can occupy, the building itself may not be ready to be registered, because there could be some other units that are not ready to occupy, but those are separated. So you see, there is a period from the time the city says the first units are available to be occupied until the building gets registered. And that's a longer process with the land registry office, with government officials. And so that period of time between, hey, you can move in, and the final registration closing can be anywhere from 6 to 12 months, in many cases. So what do you pay during those 6 months? So what are you paying? So you see, let's say you paid $500,000 for our condominium, and up until occupancy, let's just say you paid 20%. You paid 20% down. So let's say up until occupancy, you paid 20% down, $100,000. So you still owe the builder $400,000, but you're moving in, but you're not getting title because they can't close the deal. So what you will do is you'll pay the builder interest on what you owe on $400,000. Usually it's somewhere between 2 and 3%, and that's part of your monthly rent. Then you're going to pay the maintenance fee. So that's the maintenance fee that you would be paying if you lived in the condominium. And the third aspect is your share of property taxes. So, depending on how much you paid as a purchase price, it's a percentage usually of the 0.8% on a monthly basis. So those three numbers together is the occupancy fee, the rent you pay during occupancy. And this is why many investors want to rent out their unit at occupancy, because they want to collect money to pay their occupancy fee. And now when you close the deal, could be 6 months or a year later, now you're going to pay the builder the rest of your $400,000. So you don't have to pay interest anymore. You'll pay interest to your bank. You'll pay interest to your bank yourself under your mortgage. Then you'll still pay maintenance fees, but now you'll pay them to the condominium, and you'll pay property taxes to the city. So that occupancy fee is just designed for that period between when you're allowed to move in and the final registration.
Yeah, and it's very important to have that right to lease during occupancy clause. Otherwise, essentially, your unit is sitting vacant while you're paying this phantom rent, so to speak, and you can't even put your tenant in. So it's very important.
Very important that you negotiate that ability at the sales office right away. I know with you and the agents that you work with, you try to insist that the buyer has that right to lease at occupancy.
And the reason, Mark, that developers don't want to put right to lease during occupancy as a standard clause in the agreement is essentially the laws in Canada are very favored towards the tenants. So essentially, if I put a tenant in there and I don't have the ability to close, they're pretty much stuck with that tenant. Is that correct?
It's very hard in almost any case, as you know, to evict a tenant who doesn't want to leave. And so all the good news is it's very rare, in my opinion, where somebody is able to close occupancy that they can't close at final closing or assign their agreement. It's very rare that you see that. So yes, builders are a little bit worried about that, and that's why they put clauses in and they have their forms of tenancy agreements. But in my experience, this is not going to be a problem for an investor.
Okay, so we've touched on cap development charges. We've touched on the right to assign, right to lease during occupancy. Are there any other incentives, particularly that you're looking for in your review?
Well, you've hit on the big ones because look, when I'm talking to a buyer, they want to know how much am I paying total.
Yeah.
That's why I have to explain the HST. You're going to have to pay another $24,000 if you're going to rent it out, but you're going to get that $24,000 back. So number one, they want to know what's it going to cost. Another thing that I try to watch for is when the builder gives you the package, they sort of give you a number what your maintenance fee is going to be. So they may say in the first year, your maintenance fee is going to be $750. But at the bottom, it says, oh, by the way, after June of 2023, we can raise that by 6, 7, 8%. And so now that first year payment might be a lot more than $750. So that's one of the things I'm looking at as well is, okay, because when people look at this, they think they're going to pay $750, but then in the fine print, it says they might pay $800 or $850. So I try to warn people about that as well, that they should try to get some certainty. How much can a builder raise the maintenance fee? So that's another thing, and that goes along with what's it going to cost me. So it's what's it going to cost me. An assignment says, God forbid my life changes. How do I get out of here? And I'm an investor. Okay, you want to have the right to lease. And so those to me are the main things. And, look, they've been very lucrative for people, as you know. The assignment, a lot of people have made a lot of money, and then they complain they have to pay a lot of tax. And that should be the worst thing that you complain of, is you got to pay a lot of tax. I've lived through the ups and downs of real estate where people went broke. And so it's not the greatest penalty to pay a little bit of tax.
100%. The other thing I wanted to touch on, it doesn't happen very often, but it's definitely a question that I get from my buyers a lot. What happens in the event that the building does end up getting canceled? What happens to the deposits? How long does it take to get them back? Is there a cap on the amount you can get back? Could you just give us some insight?
Yeah, you have to look at the Tarion, website as well as the agreement to purchase and sale.
Just one second, Mark. For those who don't know what Tarion is, could you explain what Tarion means and what it does?
Yeah, builders, in order to sell brand new homes, have to get registered with a government agency that we refer to as Tarion. And Tarion provides their own protections for buyers. For example, your builder's not finishing what they promised to do, you complain to Tarion, and they try to act to make sure that things get done. And if the builder doesn't, Tarion ends up having some responsibility to do that. And Tarion will also guarantee a certain amount of a deposit that you make. So with a condo, it may not be very much that Tarion will guarantee. So because of that, that's why you're making your payment typically to the builder lawyer, because if it's paid to the builder lawyer, all the deposits are protected. So when the builder goes, if the builder cancels, the contract says you will get all your money back. And usually it's quite quick to get your money back. But you see, people are upset because they don't want their money back.
Yeah.
Because that unit would have been worth another $200,000 today. But this is why you have to research the builder. I always say to people, the contract's not important. It's the builder that you have to research, because then this is going to get built and you'll do well. When people promise the moon, you'll get your deposit back. I've rarely seen, there was maybe one case where a lawyer ran away with the money, but one out of thousands.
Yeah,
You don't
most of
get
the
paid.
contracts are pretty much done by the five
Now,
law firms in the
yeah.
entire country, or like
Now,
pretty much dominating.
Now, when you buy from a builder a house, it's a little bit trickier because Tarion will protect, up to 10% or $100,000 as a deposit. The problem is when you buy from a builder, many times they need your money to build. So many times people are paying more than $100,000 directly to the builder. Then the builder can't finish, and they go broke. You're not going to get all your money back. You're limited, as I said, to maybe that 100,000. But that does not happen with high-rise condominiums. The builders, they know the program. Their lawyers know the program. That's why you make the checks payable to the lawyers, and they're completely protected. Or your contract says that if money goes to a builder, they have to get an insurance policy to cover all your money. So you don't have to worry about getting your money back, but you don't want your money back. You want that profit. You're not going to get any profit.
One of the other great things about Tarion is that once your unit is complete, you are protected against like deficiencies with the appliances and so forth. Can you just touch a little bit on that? The differences.
Well, it's very important.
Yeah.
You see, before you take occupancy, the builder goes through the unit with you and you point out everything that's wrong and everything that has to be fixed. And you have to be very careful to note everything on this checklist. And then that goes to Tarion, and then the builder has to fix everything. And if they don't fix everything, you have a year from the time you move in to complain and say, wait a minute, they didn't fix this, they didn't fix that. And Tarion will get involved because the builder doesn't want to have a bad reputation. So they're going to try to fix this. And I always say to people, keep pestering the builder, threaten to go to Tarion, and usually the stuff gets done because builders want to have a good reputation with Tarion, because that's where new buyers go to look. When I say go to look for due diligence, they'll go to Tarion and see what have people written about them. When they, go for lawyers, they'll check me out and my firm, RealEstateLawyers.ca, and they'll check me out. And I say, go ahead, check me out as well, because people should do the proper due diligence.
And lastly, Mark, let's create a scenario where you're given complete control of the pre-construction process from a legal perspective. What are some changes that you would want to see implemented?
You're asking questions, that people have been trying to for a long time. How do you beef up buyer rights? But I think that since most new buyers already do very well when it comes to the finished product and the fact that their property has appreciated in price, they've done well, the builder has done well. And so it's pretty much a win-win for everything. I think the changes they're making now, that there has this condominium authority that's going to be able to solve all these disputes between owners and the condominium management after the building is registered. That to me is more what people need, because otherwise, if you have to sue a condominium board because you don't like what they're doing, they'll go bankrupt with lawyers. So that to me is where the government is helping. They're putting things in place so the disputes between owners and the board can be solved a lot cheaper and quicker. That to me is where the government can help more.
I've also noticed this year specifically, the APSs have changed. There's a few additional schedules on the front of the agreement. Can you just touch on that?
The agreement has always said, when is it going to be ready? And there's ways the builders can delay. And the most they can be penalized is like $7,500 in the extreme if they're late. And if they miss a final deadline, you can cancel the deal. Do you want to cancel the deal in 5 years? You just get your money back. So, the schedules will say clearly. They try to say how much all the extra charges are. So they lay it all out. I usually say, look at pages 45 and 46, and you'll see all the extra charges there. And so people can add them all up, and they'll see how much they're going to pay in extra charges. So they've tried to be more transparent about delays, but you saw with pandemic, There's fine print that say, oh, if it's a pandemic, we can delay 1 year, 1.5 years. But in many cases, investors were saying, great, I don't have to come up with the money. My unit will be worth more in 1.5 years. So they didn't mind that much. So in general, the pre-construction sort of industry, it works for everybody, in my opinion. The fact is people are not building rental apartments, and people have to live somewhere. And so the pre-construction industry, in many cases, is the rental industry for all our new immigrants and everyone else coming into the province. And so it fills a need. And so now I used to say that because these new condos are being built and they're going to be outside rent control. So, for example, anybody who bought a new condo in 2019, today you can raise the rent 20%.
Right.
20%, because of the Conservatives passed a law in 2018 that allowed this. But if the NDP or the Liberals win the next election, they're going to just change that back. So they're not going to allow any rent increase more than 1 or 2% a year. So this is why developers didn't build a ton of new rental housing. You would think, hey, it's all clear of rent review. Let's build rental housing. Well, not really, because if a new government comes in, they're going to take it out. So this is why the pre-construction industry, in many ways, is the rental industry that the province so desperately needs. And that's why, in general, it works for everybody. It works for the owners, it works for the builders, and for the end users, whoever it's going to be.
Yeah, we're very fortunate that we live in Toronto, where we have such a strong, vibrant pre-construction market where a lot of people have made, great returns on their initial investments.
Look, you can't make this anywhere else. No matter what anybody tells you, it's simple math. You go buy a pre-construction today for $500,000. How much you going to put in? Maybe $100,000.
Yeah.
Okay, $100,000 in 4 years. Even if you sold it for $600,000, you've made $100,000 on $100,000 investment.
Yeah, you doubled
your money, and many people make many more times. Yeah, when you go into the stock market and you want to put in $100,000, nobody's going to lend you any money to buy more stocks. So, and the great investment guys, most they're ever going to make you is 10% on a year, and that's very good. They'll say they're super if they can give you 10%.
Yeah.
So the math has always been there for real estate, but I warn people, you've got to be in it for like a good 4 years, because then you take away the risks of the market changing. Because they're saying right away, if they raise interest rates next March, that's going to hit the market if that happens. So if you're tight and you can't afford things, well, that's bad. But if you've got money and you can put it away and wait 3 or 4 years, what's the difference if properties go down in value for a year? They're going to come back. And that's, I think, why you'll continue to do well in this industry.
Yeah, you don't day trade real estate.
I will say that, I've done a lot of contract reviews for people. And so if people want to send me their contracts to review, typically I say as a favor to you, SEHR, that I won't charge you for that review in the 10 days. And as long as you agree to use my firm for closing, and all our pricing is on our website at RealEstateLawyers.ca. So we're very transparent with our pricing as well. And so I can help out all your clients to do that. And if anybody has any questions, it's just Mark at RealEstateLawyers.ca.
That's great. This whole interview has been fascinating. I really appreciate you coming and doing this, Mark. I think anybody watching or listening is going to get some tremendous value out of this. There's a reason why you're the go-to guy in the industry. We'll definitely be sending a lot more business to you over these upcoming years. Okay. And you gave your email, which is great. And thanks for all the content that you put out there as well.
You're very welcome, SEHR. I just wish you continued success to you and all your investor clients. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Mark, for joining us today. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.